Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
I found a kid who swings a golf club like a dream. I'd like to try to qualify him for the U.S. Amateurs.
Coming to Apple TV Plus.
What's your name?
I'm not into older guys, but I'm flattered.
A new comedy series, Stick.
I don't want to go on this trip.
Your mouth's saying one thing, but those eyes are saying something else.
From the home of Ted Lasso.
This is your shot at redemption? This is your mulligan?
Owen Wilson.
This game takes and it takes. The game's finally giving me something back.
Stick.
You know Arnold Palmer?
Iced tea, lemonade, mix it.
I'm missing a nap for this.
Streaming June 4th on Apple TV Plus.
All I'm saying is, Gavin, Mr. Bean versus Mr. T. I think I know where I'm going to put my money.
The following podcast contains...
But swearing and using dirty words is not one of my vices. I don't use foul language, and I don't like to hear anyone else use it either.
Explicit language.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When you met a fool and you just felt nothing, what the hell were you thinking? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 446, Many Fools Were Pitied edition of the show. We talk about the 80s cultural phenomenon that was Mr. T. Stay tuned. The What the Hell Are You Thinking podcast is brought to you by Fool's Gold. It looks like gold. Are you in the market for large amounts of gold jewelry and experiencing sticker shock? Then you need Fool's Gold. From earrings to rope chains, chalices, crowns, and candlesticks, Fool's Gold has all the gold-ish accoutrements you can imagine, all at prices you can afford. What makes gold gold? The shiny yellow color. But that doesn't mean it has to be actual gold. It just needs to look enough like gold for people to think it's gold. Fool's Gold, because real gold is expensive and ours is cheap crap, and the only one that will ever know is you.
The name is Mr. T. First name is Mr. Middle name is that period. Last name is T. Listen and listen good. I'm talking to you. When a new kid moves in on your block, what's your attitude? Do you figure, what do we need him for? Well, I pity the fool that makes that mistake. The friends you already got might not be all the friends you ever need. And when you keep new people out, just because they're new to you, you're only cheating yourself. So don't you ever write nobody off just because he's the new kid on the block. You never know what you might be missing till you get to know them. So take it from me, Mr. T. But listen up now. This is serious. When you're tempted to do something wrong, even if the reasons are good, think twice, because you never know how things will turn out. You might be getting yourself and everybody else into a whole lot of trouble. Do what's right, and you can't go wrong. Take it from me, Mr. T.
Growing up like I did, we didn't have a lot of useless items in our lives.
Because you were poor?
Well, if you want to be blunt about it, yes. It wasn't like we were living in a clapboard shack kind of poor. I mean, if you don't count that year and a half that my mom and I lived in a clapboard shack while my dad was in the army.
Peasants.
What I'm saying is we had enough to live on, but there wasn't a lot of flash. What the kids today, I don't know, would call, bling?
People don't really say that anymore, man.
Sorry, I guess the kids today would call it boom, boom, shiz, rizzler or something like that. I don't know kids.
Clearly, you don't.
My folks had their weddings rings. My mom had a couple of cheap necklaces, and that was about it. After my dad joined the Air Force, we moved into the middle class, and I remember my dad buying my mom a really nice string of pearls, which she loved. But we weren't string of pearls kind of people. I suspect the total number of times my mother has worn those pearls could be tallied on two hands with a finger or two left over.
White trash, plain and simple.
No, if we were white trash, my mom would have worn them everywhere. And a halter top. And my mother has never worn a halter top in her entire life. And just thinking about the idea of my mom in a halter top is kind of skeeving me out. The first real piece of jewelry I ever owned, besides the crucifix I bought because I was afraid of vampires.
Vampires?
Yeah, it was Stephen King's fault. My first real piece of jewelry was my high school class ring. I have no idea why I bought a class ring. I'd only attended that school for 2 years, and honestly, I knew when I left town I'd never see or think about anyone from that school ever again.
Still, friends forever!
Before Facebook, y'all, when you moved away, you never saw those fuckers again. But I bought that ring, and I wore it for some reason. It was a gaudy hunk of fake silver with a chunk of black glass until one night, I lost it at a cotton field when the dog leash ripped it off my finger while we were chasing a ghost around the nuclear weapons storage area in Arkansas.
A ghost?
Yeah, the Air Force Base was haunted. People were all the time seeing ghosts and calling out dog handlers to chase them around in the dark.
Totally fucking with you.
Yo, they definitely were, and life on a nuke base was pretty boring, so we did what we had to do to make it through the midnight shift. And anyway, long story short, I lost my high school ring, and this was the last piece of jewelry I ever bought. I was given a ring by someone once, but then they broke up with me, and I threw it in the ocean.
Dude, that's so sad.
No, that's not that sad. I mean, I got it back. I'm not a very good thrower. It landed about 5 feet from me, and I was really drunk when I threw it.
Of course you were!
What I'm saying is, I'm not a jewelry guy. It's not my style. Never wore it, don't like it, and I'm cool with that. But you know who is a jewelry guy? Laurence Tereaud. And Laurence Tereaud is our topic this week.
Who the hell is that?
Oh, you probably know him better by his nom de guerre, Mr. T. The United States of America is certainly not alone in the world when it comes to cultural icons, and our history is replete with many of them. Be they the sort of men who sail across an ocean to a land settled by people for thousands of years and,
I claim this land as property.
Which confused the people living there who did not so much think of land as something that could be owned, but rather a place where one lived, and this Columbus fucker did not actually live there. Also, there was him raping, killing, and slave-taking, which, again, they weren't particularly keen about. This did not stop other Europeans from coming over and doing the same thing, and for some reason, Americans later on were like,
okay, these are our guys.
Later, we began to accumulate some homegrown icons. The earliest were dudes who went further west on the continent here and then did European things to the people living there. We venerated a whole bunch of dudes who said they had a hotline to heaven, despite the fact that many of them were actual con artists who looked in a hat and pretended to read from some golden plates that definitely didn't exist.
Mormon.
Not all of them. Most of the con artists were using the face we already had. Murderers figure big in our cultural mythology. Not just the state-sanctioned murderers, but like private enterprise killers, like Jesse James, Billy the Kid, Al Capone, John Dillinger. I mean, they killed a shit ton of people, but they were doing it for themselves, and they loom large on our cultural landscape. Speaking of private enterprise, Americans do love their capitalists. Ford, Carnegie, Rockefeller.
Wright brothers, Elon Musk, Ephraim Cochrane.
Then there are the presidents from Washington to Lincoln. After that, things go downhill for a while until we reach FDR and then eventually Jimmy Carter.
Are you afraid to mention his name?
Okay, no, I'm not going to mention his name because he's not a great president. And two, I think I say his name too much.
Pussy.
I'm not going to be baited into talking about Ronald Reagan.
He said it!
But for about the past century or so, America has selected its cultural icons from popular culture. First music, then movies, and finally television. This show has covered dozens of them over the years, but many, if not most of them, share some defining traits. They were all dudes, and they were all...
It's very white.
There are a smattering of non-white names, but for the most part, Cracker City. This began to shift during the 1960s when people of color were gradually, reluctantly, and begrudgingly acknowledged as part of the American popular culture experience. Before long, famous black men began to be considered iconic. You know, people like, Bill Cosby. Next! Or O.J. Simpson.
Dude, Jesus.
R.I.P. O.J. I don't believe in hell, but if there is one, you're in it right now. Now, admittedly, O.J. and Bill Cosby, poor choices. But in the 1980s, Americans finally got the black pop culture role model they deserved.
I don't like where this is going.
I know you always think that I'm a cynical asshole, with good reason, but I assure you, I'm not going to speak ill of Mr. T, at least not as far as I know. I mean, I haven't finished all the research when I wrote this actual paragraph. Born Laurence Tereaud on May 21st, 1952 in Chicago, Illinois, in the Robert Taylor homes on the South Side, the youngest boy of 12 children.
Yo, Dad, keep it in your pants.
His father, Nathaniel Tereaud, was a minister.
He a man of God.
Sure, in the sense that he had a kid and then abandoned him, or in his case, a bunch of kids and then abandoned them, which is exactly what he did to young Laurence when he was 5, leaving his mother to raise all those kids on very little money. The family, after being abandoned by their God-fearing father, changed their last name to Tereaud. He, Mr. T, would legally change it to just T in the mid-1970s. Mr. T's earliest years in the Robert Taylor homes, a notoriously rough housing project, are sketchy and provided entirely by Mr. T in his autobiography.
Have you read it?
You vastly overestimate how much time I have to spend in research before writing these shows. Don't exactly have a staff. And Gavin refuses to read anything outside of the English lit canon. And he calls everything else colonial garbage. So I'm working with rather less extensive sources.
Thank you, Wikipedia.
So let's just say that his early life was rough, and according to T, it was his mother that kept him on the straight and narrow path. Young Mr. T was an accomplished high school athlete, football, wrestling, and martial arts. He was a Chicago citywide wrestling champion and won a football scholarship to Prairie View A&M University in Texas. Now, Mr. T, not a great student. Biography.com says of his academics, quote, a constant daydreamer, Tereaud's head in the clouds attitude earned him average grades, unquote. But so-so grades and excellent athletics are what is called prime college material even today. Unfortunately, Mr. T's academic career, his college football career, was notably brief. He was expelled from the university after his first year.
For getting bad grades.
I told you he was a football player in Texas. In 1970, they didn't get bad grades. No, Mr. T, still Laurence Tereaud at the time, was expelled for rioting.
Wait, what?
Well, that was one of the violations of the Code of Student Conduct. According to the university publication PVPantherProject.com, it was a bit more expansive. Quote, February 26, 2 days after an estimated 1,000 PVAMU students marched up to his home and presented him with a list of 19 demands. They're speaking of the university president now, including his resignation. President Thomas refused to bow immediately to the demands, however, arguing that he did not feel that he should reply to any demands under threat of coercion, intimidation, or disruption. And the students proceeded to destroy over $200,000 of property on campus. After leaving his home on Wednesday evening, the students burned down the campus security building, the dean of men's offices, and the office of freshman studies. They overturned a security patrol car and set it on fire. They broke into and looted the college exchange store. On Thursday morning, the students set fire to the Army ROTC building and smashed windows in several dormitories, unquote.
Oh, way to go, T.
Among the students not readmitted after the incident was the vice president of the freshman class, one Laurence Tereaud. Now, look, this sort of thing was incredibly common in the early 1970s. If your campus hadn't burnt down at least one building, you weren't even protesting, bro. And honestly, all this modern freak out over woke college students is fucking laughable. Check back in with me when the student unions start to go up in flames. Mr. T left college, spent a few years bumming around and working before deciding his life needed some focus, and...
Well, I thought about the army. Dad said, son, you must be high. And I thought, yeah.
Or in his case, the National Guard. Now, when he joined the Army, I'm not sure, the timeline is a little vague on when he officially did it, so I don't know if he was still Tereaud or Mr. T then. And this brings me to, well, as good a time as any to explain why Mr. T became Mr. T. Quoting from Wikipedia, and this is Mr. T speaking, I think about my father being called boy, my uncle being called boy, my brother coming back from Vietnam and being called boy. So I questioned myself, what does a black man have to do before he's given respect as a man? So when I was 18 years old, when I was old enough to fight and die for my country, old enough to drink, old enough to vote, I said I was old enough to be called a man. I self-ordained myself Mr. T, so the first words out of everybody's mouth is Mr., unquote. Like I said, I don't know if he had legally changed his name, but I get this image of his drill instructor calling him Private T, which for anyone else except someone who looks like Mr. T would be quite demeaning, but I kind of think those sergeants maybe put a little bit of respect on the name even if they didn't really want to. T was selected for the military police in the Army, which is what the military does with bigger dudes without the skill or desire or ability to do mechanical or administrative jobs.
Is that what happened to you?
Sure. We'll go with that more flattering explanation as opposed to what actually happened. What kind of soldier was Mr. T, who, keep in mind, had been tossed out of college for burning down a campus protesting the war? Well, military.com tells us, quote, there is one legend that happens to be true where Mr. T was a less than ideal soldier. At some point during his military career, a platoon sergeant started throwing his weight around. He ordered Private Mr. T to chop down trees on the base, but failed to mention how many. Mr. T axed 70 trees in 3.5 hours before the company commander ordered him to stop, unquote. Mr. T had quite a history of chopping down trees. After his time in the Guard, T came back to civilian life and began flirting with playing professional football. But a knee injury kept him from I believe it was the Green Bay Packers, and so he became a bouncer. Bouncers are a misunderstood profession, as we detailed in episode number 385.
That's a plug.
And it was in bouncing that T adopted his signature hairstyle, which is not a mohawk.
It looks like it.
It's modeled on the hairstyles of the Mandinka warriors of Mali, and T did not care for you calling it a mohawk. It's also at this time that he began to wear extensive amounts of gold chains, which, according to T, he took from folks that he booted from the Dingbat, the hottest disco in Chicago, where he bounced at the time. Except, legally speaking, that whole story is kinda...
It's kind of bullshit.
Because the character we all know as Mr. T was not created by Laurence Tereaud. It was created by a guy named Calvin. Quoting now from a 1996 article in the UPI. Quote, Circuit Court Judge Kenneth Gillis ordered Tereaud to pay $4.9 million to Calvin Hollis and John Bitoy, who said they were promised 20% of his gross earnings for life when they created his Mr. T persona. Again, in 1996, there's major confusion over Mr. T had actually changed his name legally to Mr. T, and I'm not entirely sure that it ever actually did get legally changed. It could be just a stage name. These are the conundrums that I faced while researching this episode. Tereaud had hit big in 1982, starred as Mr. T in the A-Team television series and as Sylvester Stallone's nemesis in Rocky III. He reported making at least $5 million a year on his tax returns until 1993, but has not made a movie in years. I was the originator of Mr. T, Hollins told the Chicago Sun-Times. I created the image from the gold to the hairdo. It's like an invention. Hollins said he hired Tereaud as a bouncer at Dingbats Club in 1978 and promoted him as Mr. T in the world's toughest bouncer contest. Tereaud said he parted company with Hollins and Bitoy in 1982, and they did nothing to earn part of his income, unquote. From what I could tell, Mr. T paid the money. The bouncer gig did open the door for Mr. T to become a celebrity bodyguard for luminaries such as Steve McQueen, Diana Ross, Michael Jackson, LeVar Burton,
Jordy,
and Muhammad Ali. And it also gave him access to one Sylvester Stallone, who was looking for just the right kind of dude for Rocky to fight in his movie Rocky III, and so he cast Mr. T as Clubber Lang.
No, I don't hate Balboa, but I pity the fool, and I will destroy any man who tries to take what I got.
What's your prediction for the fight, then?
Prediction?
Yes, prediction.
Pain.
It was Rocky III that was the origin of his signature catchphrase about pitying fools. Though there are questions as to whether or not I Pity the Fool was written by Sylvester Stallone, who wrote Rocky III, or ad-libbed by Mr. T, which are unresolved, I guess you could say. But again, I am not here to cast aspersions on Mr. T. I'm here to tell you a story. In Rocky III, Clubber Lang beats the shit out of Rocky in their first fight. Spoiler alert, Rocky wins at the end of the film. But it was in this role that T met Hollywood. He starred in another boxing movie and then in an underrated comedy classic by the name of DC Cab.
DC Cab. They've got class.
Where to, baby?
Nowhere with you.
And they care.
You charge Mr. and Mrs. Tomatsu $195.
They had a lot of luggage. Two. We're the worst company in town, and we know it.
Get out of my cab, I'm rich!
You don't have to shut us
This
down.
company is closed pending further investigation.
make an investment in DC Cab.
If I wanted responsibility, I'd have been a damn sex surrogate.
Fasten your seatbelt. Because they're back on the street. DC Cab.
But it was not DC Cab that made Mr. T a household name in the 1980s. That was a little TV show. You might be familiar with it.
10 years ago, a crack commando unit was sent to prison by a military court for a crime they didn't commit. These men promptly escaped from maximum security stockade to the Los Angeles underground. Today, still wanted by the government, they survive as soldiers of fortune. If you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A-Team.
If you were a kid in the mid-1980s, you fucking loved the A-Team. This show had everything. Guns, explosions, fistfights, helicopters, cigar smoking, bad guys who were actually good guys, a fucking cool van. And did I mention the guns and explosions? There were so many explosions, and yet somehow no one was ever hurt. Basically, the A-Team was a live-action Coyote vs. Roadrunner cartoon with astonishing act of violence committed multiple times an episode without all the blood, dismemberment, and death one usually associates with large caliber firearms and improvised explosive devices. Hannibal, Faves, Howling Mad Murdoch, and B.A. Baracus would employ the kind of firepower an Army Special Forces team would be proud to unleash, and the bad guys would walk out from the flames all singed and tapping the side of their head to clear the ringing in their ears as the A-Team escaped to fight another day.
I love it when a plan comes together.
And it was B.A. Baracus, played by Mr. T, that all the kids loved the most. This giant of the man with a Mandinka hair and gold chains who could bend iron bars and toss evildoers over his head like he was flipping a Coke into a trash can, but was also afraid to fly and spoke to every little boy in America in a way no one else seemed to. Be those little boys black, white, and Hispanic?
Asians.
Well, maybe not Asian little boys, because a disturbing number of the villains in the A-Team were actually of Asian origin. And that was kind of problematic, and Asians still had a long way to go. Arguably, still have not quite got there with representation in Hollywood. But the upside is for Mr. T, everyone wanted him to pitch their products or their ideas. Quoting now from an article on MeTV, quote, "But once the A-Team premiered, Mr. T became a household name, earning $80,000 a week for his role as B.A. with Bob from Ask Bob describing in detail why exactly Mr. T was worth every penny. Because the muscle man was so universally appealing. He's the strong father image some kids have never known. He's the guy you've always prayed would happen along when some bully picked on you at the playground. He's the guy that grown-ups secretly envy for his ability to deal decisively with confrontations that most of us might run from. He praised Mr. T, that would be, I guess, Bob from Ask Bob, for turning down lucrative but unsavory roles that would have alienated his young fans. Even if he's a short-lived phenomenon, the T-Man is currently riding the crest of a well-orchestrated public relations campaign that will leave him a very wealthy man. I think he deserves every buck he makes. Mr. T was smart enough to realize there was a gold mine out there if he approached it correctly. In my opinion, he's made all the right moves," unquote. And of course, because it was the 1980s, there were toys, and then there was the breakfast cereal.
I know Cool, and Cool's teaming up with a good balanced breakfast.
Teaming up with Mr. T cereal, it's getting on the team that knows how cool breakfast can be. You get a crispy corn taste with a touch of brown sugar. Teaming up with Mr. T.
It's Cool.
Teaming up with Mr. T, golden sweet crispy teas. One bite and you're gonna be eating with the team that's teaming up with Mr. T.
It's Cool.
Teaming up with Mr. T.
I don't specifically remember what Mr. T breakfast cereal tasted like, or even if I ever had it, I can just only assume that it tasted cool. There were Mr. T action figures, Mr. T t-shirts, Mr. T lunchbox, Mr. T posters, and Mr. T telephone calling card plans. You know, all the usual junk merch that makes 80s pop culture's icons very much money. More from biography.com, quote, "Gaining a reputation as an advocate and a role model for young people, Mr. T began aiming more of his work towards helping the youth. In 1984, he released a music album entitled Mr. T's Commandments that encouraged children to make good choices. He followed the success of this album with a motivational video and film soundtrack called Be Somebody or Be Somebody's Fool, aimed at encouraging children to make responsible decisions," unquote. Some of these pithy nuggets of wisdom were the intro tape to this particular episode. And this is when the Reagans came calling. Nancy's Just Say No campaign was always on the lookout for ways to connect to the kids, because that was easier and cheaper than the government actually doing any meaningful action to help children. According to an article on people.com, quote, "Mr. T, 63, partnered with the former First Lady on her Just Say No campaign against drugs in 1983. Word got out that Mr. T was going to the neighborhoods and talking to kids and telling them to stay in school and don't do drugs and listen to your mother," the star says. That's when Reagan was about to launch her Just Say No campaign, so they asked if I would help them. I was so honored. I was a kid from the ghetto, from the hood, from the other side of the tracks, and I get the opportunity to work with a first family on such a powerful cause. I was honored, and I'm still honored. A photo of Reagan sitting on Mr. T's lap made headlines in 1983 when he was the White House Santa, handing out Mr. T dolls to guests. I gave Nancy a doll and then another, and then somebody said, "Hey, Nancy, why don't you sit on Santa's lap?" And I said, "Okay." Back then I was all, "Can you believe that? She's sitting on my lap. Wow, I was honored," unquote. This was a big fucking deal. Quoting from the story in the Washington Post, quote, "When the First Lady sat on his lap, even Mr. T seemed shocked. Oh, wow. Now that'll start some scandals," he declared. "Thank you, Mrs. Reagan. Wow, she kissed me," unquote. Pod friends, you who were not alive at the time cannot possibly comprehend the sheer weirdness of Nancy Reagan,
some of the whitest people in the world,
sitting on the lap and kissing the forehead of someone who could reasonably be considered one of the most blackest men in America at the time, dressed as Santa Claus in the motherfuck White House. In 1983, it ought to have caused the heads to explode of every racist white person in America. But no, I don't remember anyone freaking out. And I couldn't find any reports about racist shitbags screaming their empty heads off over their beloved Nancy kissing a large black man in the White House. That is how fucking popular Mr. T was in the 1980s. Or it's also equally possible that the racist people took one look at this image and one look at Mr. T and thought,
"Let it slide this time."
Because I've noticed that angry white racists tend to moderate their tone around large, muscular black men who could literally rip their arms off and beat them to death with them. They're funny like that. Mr. T went into professional wrestling in 1985, teaming up with Hulk Hogan and starting a very famous beef with Rowdy Roddy Piper, and he is in the WWE Hall of Fame. His time in the ring ended in the early 1990s when he was diagnosed with T-cell lymphoma.
Ironic.
Mr. T thought so. He said at the time, quote, "Can you imagine that cancer with my name on it, a personalized cancer?" You know, a lot of times I would have done the voice for literally quoting someone like that, but I thought in this case I probably shouldn't.
Good call. Good call.
He beat the cancer, probably by blowing it up. He got married. He raised a family. One of the other skeletons in his closet that I could find is that he allegedly abandoned a son outside of his marriage.
Allegedly.
But the case was eventually dismissed. One of his daughters now, with his now ex-wife Phyllis, is a stand-up comedian. Mr. T did the obligatory reality show in the early aughts, a home repair show called, I swear to God, I wish I was making this up, I Pity the Tool in 2015, and still appears in the occasional commercial, but otherwise is largely retired from public life. Of course, the one recurring theme with Mr. T is his religious faith.
This ought to be good.
Look, I make no pretense of believing, but as I've repeatedly pointed out, if others believe, I think great, good for them. It's when I see someone using religion as a weapon against difference that I come on cranky. But from all I can see, Mr. T seems to be a genuine man of faith. Not perfect, but doing what he can. He's never lashed out against the gays. The worst thing that I could actually find about him saying about the gays in the 1980s, when everybody was bashing the gays, when there was a People magazine interview from 1983 when a reporter asked, quote, "Are you gay?" And Mr. T replied, "Print that I am, and half your readers will probably say, yeah, I knew all along it was a sissy, and the other half will tear up your magazine." The reporter picks back up in the text, "See, Mr. T's not so tough. He didn't kill the reporter who asked him these questions. He didn't eat him for breakfast, didn't even rough him up a little," unquote. Which, I gotta say, that reply, if someone asks you and you're a large man, black or white, like Mr. T in 1983, not beating the shit out of the person who asked you that, is fucking enlightened thinking. During the research for this show, I found a passage on belief.net where Mr. T was pontificating on his faith, in which he was asked, quote, "Why do you think it's better to pity the fool instead of chastise him?" We'll leave aside whether or not Mr. T invented it or co-opted it from the script and just say that Mr. T lived by the phrase, "I pity the fool," for the remainder of his time after Rocky III. And Mr. T replies, "I'm glad you brought it up. If I pity someone, actually, I'm showing them mercy. Job asked for mercy. If I pity someone, you're not going to feel sorry for them, but you're going to cut them some slack. If you chastise someone, you can do it by kind words, encouraging words, lifting them up, instead of tearing them down, getting positive with them, letting them know we've got time. We're not going to rush it. We're going to take our time with it. People can't turn around overnight. I try to get them to believe in themselves. That's the key. If they don't believe in themselves, then they're going to quit. I try to give them reasons to keep on going, unquote. Which I got to say, that's not a bad philosophy. There's a lot of people out there that I consider fools that I should pity instead of thinking that they're fucking assholes. Mr. T's a better person than I. And maybe if me and all the unpitying religious people out there, we wouldn't think as badly as each other as we do. I mean, I still wouldn't believe in God and anything. I just think that that's a pretty good idea. Now, I gotta admit, I looked for some dark shit about Mr. T, and I kind of found a little bit because, you know, I'm an asshole like that.
True words were never spoken.
But what I found was a man that used his fame and good fortune to give back not just to his community, but to everyone. He was and is deeply committed to social justice, not just for black people, but for everyone. Is he a self-aggrandizing capitalist looking to make a buck? Of course he is. He's an American. I mean, you could make the same argument about me. The only difference is I don't make a lot of money, but if someone came along and offered me a lot of money, I'm not saying that I wouldn't become one. But he used some of those bucks to give back, and that sets him above a lot of other people who did the same thing. Did he collude with the Reagan administration to soft their edges and woo voters who might otherwise not have voted for Reagan because Reagan was a fucking vicious-ass fucking racist?
Most definitely.
Yeah, he did. But his heart was in the right place when he did it. And so here at the end of the show, I have to break with a long-running tradition that has been sort of a hallmark of the What the Hell Were You Thinking podcast, in which I come to you at the end of it either saying, look how fucked up everything is and this is what we should do to make it better, or look how fucked up everything is and this is always going to be fucked up because it was always fucked up. And I come to you with Mr. T was actually all right. He was the real deal. Not a fucking hero, not a perfect icon, but he did what he could and he did the best he could. And that sets him apart from so many other motherfuckers in the 1980s. And so I guess we're closing the show on kind of a wholesome note, which I gotta be honest with you, makes me feel really uncomfortable.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
That is it for the show this week. You know, I was worried. I couldn't find enough stuff to carry this topic. I mean, after all, we're talking about Mr. T. The dude was on a lunchbox, for Christ's sakes. How much could I possibly say about him? But I actually had to cut stuff that I wanted to talk about to keep it close to time. And the ending, so upbeat, so gross. Don't worry. I got something next week that'll bring the nose down on this positivity train. You're going to hate it. So rate and review us wherever you get your pods. Tell a friend, tell a stranger, just tell someone. Kick us $1 at patreon.com/whatthehellpodcast. We use that money to buy old boxes of Mr. T cereal off eBay. Why? Because it's cool. Do all the things Jeremy tells you to do in the closing credits. Otherwise, you know, he will.
I pity the fool.
And so for me, Dave Howling Mad Bledsoe, producer.
I'm going to need the face man to change his name to Broken Face. Am I supposed to understand what any of that means?
Gavin and all the fictional members of the A-Team on the show, we want to say we really do love it when a show comes together like this one. And we'll see you all next week.
He's a role model for the youth and to the
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions. The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Twitter at @thehell_podcast, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
Tell them about the Twinkie.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.